So we have team coverage tonight, and we want to begin with News 2's Riley Benson. Riley has been with this case since it started. He was inside that courtroom as jury selection started today. Good evening, Riley.
Yeah, good evening, Brendan. So far, we've gotten through two groups of jurors. That's about 80 people that have been screened by Judge Clifton Newman in the courtroom behind me, starting this morning at about 10 o'clock. Now, Judge Clifton Newman asking potential jurors several questions as far as where do they work, where do they live, what do they do, what is their history, do they have any connection to Alex Murdaugh?
Good afternoon, I'm Carolyn Murray. We begin with breaking news in the Murdaugh double murder trial. We want to go right to News 2's Riley Benson in Colleton County with the latest information. And Riley, you are learning new details that could shape the future of this trial.
Well, Carolyn, sources close to Alex Murdaugh's defense tell me today that Alex Murdaugh is planning to take the stand to testify as part of his defense that could happen in the next week or two. Now, of course, that is subject to change right now as based on what witnesses are called for the state and for the defense over the next week. The state's expected to rest on Wednesday. But big news today out of Colleton County as Alex Murdaugh will potentially take the stand in his defense to testify about June 7th, the night of the murders, other things leading up to those double murders. Now, that would be the first time we hear from Alex Murdaugh at length in court.
We are interrupting your program right now with some breaking news as the Colleton County Courthouse was evacuated just moments ago due to a credible threat for a bomb during the Alex Murdaugh murder trial. We want to head straight out right now to News 2's Brendan Clark live for us at the scene. Brendan, what is the situation like there in Walterboro?
Well, good afternoon there, Hannah. Yeah, I just got here about 20 minutes ago, and as you can imagine, a much different sight than I was used to coming up to the Colleton County Courthouse. Streets are blocked off. We have major law enforcement presence outside, what I am told by News 2's Riley Benson. And we'll get him here in just a minute to tell you exactly what happened inside the courtroom. But yes, what I can tell you right now is that a bomb threat was received by the Colleton County Courthouse personnel. Here, as you can see right here, several law enforcement, they have evacuated the area, at least the courtroom and the courthouse. All the media, everyone inside was brought outside, told to go across the street as law enforcement is really cordoned off the area, as expected that they would do. They haven't said much, but they are certainly keeping us away from the scene right now. To know exactly what happened, I want to bring in News 2's Riley Benson, who's joining us now. And Riley has been inside the courtroom for the duration of this trial. And Riley, take us exactly what happened, because you said you noticed something was a little different when you were inside that courtroom. When all this happened, what time did it happen? And tell us exactly what you saw from your perspective.
Brendan, it was about a half hour ago now. We were sitting in court. We just called a new witness from SLED to testify. I'm sitting in the second section of the courthouse. I hear the bailiff to my left. Their walkie-talkie starts buzzing. I can hear something that's odd. Doesn't sound right. Caught my ear. I kind of looked over them. And then a law enforcement personnel entered the courtroom, told the judge something. Judge sends the jury on recess, and then he tells us we need to evacuate the building. So as soon as we get outside, they force people out the top part of the courthouse here, which is not used, it's not an exit. They all get outside, and you start hearing things about a credible threat. Of course, we now know that this is confirmed as a bomb threat.
Why can we believe you now when you say you didn't do this?
Well, certainly, they're hammering with the inconsistencies in the story that Alex has told since day one, since June 7, 2021, and even further back in the inconsistencies in some of these financial crimes that we were able to be brought into this trial. So, you heard this repeated line as far as when we were hearing the financial crimes, you were able to sit down with these people, look them in the eyes, and still mislead them. That's something that could come back in closing arguments as far as the murders of Paul and Maggie. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear that line again, but continuing to hammer away at these inconsistencies.
Yes, indeed, this is the end game for this trial. 28 days. Testimony is now finished. And yes, the jury has it in our hands. Welcome to our simulcast here on WSAV and WCBD. I'm Andrew Davis along with Riley Benson.
Yeah, certainly glad to have you with us tonight. Andrew, we just started this deliberation process not too long ago, maybe more, a little over an hour. And obviously now it's kind of a waiting game. We have no idea how long this process could take. It could be the next 5 minutes, or we could be here into next week. So a lot of uncertainty right now, but let's talk about some of the closing arguments we got to hear today, though.
It was really interesting to see, obviously, both sides making that last push for final votes or to make sure the last thing they get in their brain out there for those jurors was what they wanted, and defense hit especially hard on the investigation and the fact that Alec shouldn't have been the only suspect.
You know, Andrew, not a lot of surprises. Jim Griffin, Dick Harpootlian have been pushing on this investigation, how it was handled throughout the last 5.5 weeks. We've heard it time and time again. Much like the state has pushed financial crimes, the defense has pushed on this investigation. And we heard about this mistrust for law enforcement Alex Murdaugh says he had for SLED. We heard about that again today. Certainly not a lot of surprises from Jim Griffin in his closing argument.
No, absolutely. We'll hear from Jim right now so you get a taste of exactly what he had to say. And he came out with a lot of emotion, a lot of interesting topics, and really just a completely different style than anybody else in the courtroom.
Andrew, certainly, you know, Creighton Waters not the energy guy for the prosecution, so John Metter's a whole different vibe when he took over today. I think we want to take you inside the courtroom and get a listen to what that sounded like today, but certainly a whole different aspect as John Metter's tried to put a bow on this case. I want you to take a listen.
Reaction from inside the courtroom, you were there.
Well, Brendan, certainly it was a very heavy moment in the courtroom, not only after that verdict came out, but even just beforehand. But, you know, Alec stood there stoic, motionless, kind of stone-faced. You know, Buster at times was crying, wiping his face, very obviously distraught by this, his last remaining nearest family member. So you have a unique seat in the courtroom for those who, I don't know if they can see you or not, but you basically face the defense table, you face Alex. So as this verdict was read, guilty, 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 what was the look on Alex's face? From my point of view, he was stone cold, no emotion.
Stoic. News 2's Riley Benson is live at the courthouse downtown now. Riley, jurors were deliberating for more than 10 hours today.
Russell Lafitte was found guilty on 6 federal indictments: bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, misappropriation of money. That happened after 11 hours of deliberation today, and it wasn't easy. But Russell Lafitte found guilty 2 weeks after his federal trial started here in downtown Charleston. It started back on November 8th. Tonight we reached that conclusion. But again, it wasn't an easy process as jurors deliberated for about 9 to 10 hours this afternoon, came back to the judge, said that they had a couple issues. 2 jurors were then replaced. They went back to deliberations, and shortly after that came back with the guilty verdict for Russell Lafitte in all 6 federal indictments here in downtown Charleston. Now again, he's facing up to 30 years for each of those counts. That's 180 years plus $1 million fine for each of those counts. He will be allowed to remain on bond until sentencing. That's something that will likely happen in a couple months from now. They'll have to have a couple pre-sentencing hearings and come up with a recommendation for how much time is appropriate for Russell Lafitte to spend in federal prison. But again, found guilty on all 6 federal counts he was charged with here tonight in downtown Charleston after a lengthy day of deliberating. We're going to go to a soundbite. We heard from U.S. federal prosecutors after today's verdict. Take a listen.
Our News 2's Riley Benson is live on Kiawah Island. And Riley, you saw the motorcade arrive just a few hours ago.
Yeah, Brendan, Carolyn, President Biden, the First Lady, and members of the First family have made their way to Kiawah Island, where they'll spend a number of the next few days vacationing here on the island. Now, like you mentioned, that motorcade passing right by us here on Betsy Carson Parkway as they made their way to the private residence where they'll spend some time on vacation. Now, again, this trip for President Biden, his first to Kiawah Island since taking the Oval Office. Happening today after months of speculation, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott expected to announce his bid for president in a room of supporters today. He'll become the second Republican to challenge current President Joe Biden for the White House. Now, hundreds are expected to be here for this event this morning. Doors will open at 9:30. The event starts at 11. Scott's expected to speak about 11:15. Now, the second highest ranking United States Senator John Thune expected to be here as part of this morning's announcement and endorse Scott's bid for president. News 2 will bring you live, up-to-date coverage on the event all morning long. Scott is the only black Republican in the U.S. Senate. He'll be the second Republican from South Carolina to challenge incumbent President Joe Biden. Now, Scott comes into this race with likely the most cash on hand out of any GOP challenger to Biden, with about $22 million he will carry over from his 2022 Senate bid. Of course, the scary situation here on the Isle of Palms for those who were here on the beach in the moments of this shooting taking place earlier this evening. Now, talking to people who were actually out here at that time, saying once those shots began firing out on the beach, just over my shoulder really, people started running in all kinds of directions, saying that there were hundreds of people out on the beach going in several different directions trying to get away from the shooter. Now, 2 young gentlemen who just came out to me said that the shooter they saw, or somebody who they believed to be the shooter, ran underneath their hotel, followed by police. Again, we spoke to another person who lives here on the Isle of Palms and says that she picked up some kids in her golf cart talking about just their emotion, being distressed, being frustrated, being almost dumbfounded about what had happened here on the Isle of Palms. Yeah, Brendan, Carolyn, this is still an active scene here on Reed Street in downtown Charleston. You see this white house close to me and the greenhouse. These two houses involved in that fire that started about 2:30 this afternoon in downtown Charleston. Now, officials say no injuries are reported as a result of these two fires. But again, this white house close to me receiving the most damage from this fire. It has now been put out at this point, no smoke. But again, officials do remain on scene, and this is an active scene at this point.
You and Josh have shared with us that about 2:05, this storm became a part of history, and it in fact made landfall in the Georgetown County area, and that's where News 2's Riley Benson has spent the day, and he joins us now live with more information. And just since we spoke with Riley a few minutes ago, it looks like the situation has changed.
Yeah, I got a lot of rain up there, Riley. Maybe another band coming in. Talk about the situation and the conditions up there right now.
Yeah, Brendan, Carolyn, the rain is certainly picking up since the last time we talked here in Georgetown. Now, the wind not as heavy as it's been most of the day, but we had really been in kind of a lull or maybe a down period since we last talked maybe 10 minutes ago. Rain obviously picking up again here. Now, I do want to show you some of the conditions we're seeing in Georgetown since we got downtown here. This is Front Street. Front Street is closed. You can see there's a person standing in the middle of Front Street, but right now, a lot of water, really. You can see the trash can a little bit down. About a half a block down. You can see the water really on this right side. We're by the bell tower here on Front Street in downtown Georgetown, just to kind of give you a reference of where we're standing. This part is not as deep, I guess, as parts that are behind us. When we walked up to the next intersection, it's about waist deep in the road, so that part of the road is closed. This part's about half open at this point, but really just so much water is what people here in Georgetown are dealing with. I mean, you see this behind these buildings, it's flooded. There's a lot of debris behind our camera right now, as far as branches and leaves and things that are down in the roadway. You see a couple trash cans that have been moved around. You see a couple people have ventured out to kind of see what's going on as this rain band is picking up. But right now you're getting a good look at what some of that debris from the trees that's kind of just sitting on the sidewalks and in the roadways. This rain has been really relentless, pretty steady most of the day. Like I said, it's kind of came and gone, but has really been solid, and that's kind of what we're seeing is this water really has no place to go. We've heard Rob and Josh talk about that, how you obviously have some storm surge coming in and you have so much tidal water that's just been stuck there most of this week. Now those two are really converging and you see the water just has nowhere to go, kind of flooding a lot of our streets, kind of pooling and ponding. So if you are headed out, obviously officials are urging you not to leave. A state of emergency here in the city of Georgetown right now, but if you are, you want to be cautious and mindful of the water that is sitting on the roadways right now. This is obviously where Ian made landfall about a 20 to 30 minute window ago. So obviously we're going to continue to watch conditions as they're changing and improving and continuing to rain at this point here in Georgetown and bringing the very latest. Reopened for traffic to come through. Now where we're standing right now, underwater just about an hour ago. I want to show you exactly how that water was about right here, about an hour ago. So, this is where there's some benches. If you were sitting out here, you would have been sitting in the water. What you can still hear, though, is this wind behind me is really howling off of some of the boats that are sitting here in the harbor. Doesn't appear to be a whole lot of damage in downtown Georgetown overall, though. Just really a lot of debris. You can kind of see some of the branches and things scattered here on the harbor walk. That's really the main focus of the downtown area now that some of the water is receding. Is there's a lot of debris that just needs to be picked up at this point. But other than that, we're hearing reports of a rainbow somewhere in downtown Georgetown. I'm looking for it. I know Brendan wanted to shout out the rainbow. I don't see it, but the sun is trying to poke through. Good news, though, like I mentioned, it's really starting to kind of get back to normal here. The rain is, if not stopped, is very light. The only thing we're really dealing with at this point is wind and the cleanup of debris. So a lot of people kind of poking out, coming out, kind of checking things out, seeing how they look. Good news is it looks like we are trending towards being back to normal here in Georgetown. Obviously, the good news is it doesn't appear to be a whole lot of damage despite Ian making landfall right here in Georgetown just after 2 o'clock this afternoon. Guys, we'll send it back to you in studio. For now, reporting live in Georgetown, Riley Benson, count on 2.